And
Blog
welcome
Talk
back.
Radio.
It is our second I'm going to consider your host here with our experts, Ray Gaffney and Jumpin' John Provost. How are you guys doing this evening?
We're doing great, Jen. Thank you very much.
Doing great, Jen. I'm on location this week from Georgia, so I will do my best to relay good vibes from the South.
Well, thank you very, very much. And I can't believe it's already going to be 2 weeks before the Fantasy Football Fest in Atlantic City, where we will also be broadcasting live on that Sunday morning. I believe it's the 19th, so that's something to look forward to. And let's top off the show today with T.O. signing with Seattle. Did anyone expect that?
Well, I'll tell you, it's kind of a surprise. I think, frankly, any team that may be able to withstand him is Seattle. They really do need the receiving help. I don't know that they really have the strong receivers, and they're breaking in a new quarterback. So it's probably a good fit, and I think, Pete Carroll coached USC, so he's probably used to some of the egos. I think it's a good fit. They signed Braylon Edwards as well, so he's got his hands full. But I think that was precipitated by the fact that we found out that Sidney Rice may not be ready for Week 1. So I'm sure he's known that for a little while, and that's why he's signed both of those receivers. So it'll be an interesting experiment to find out. So, Ray, what do you think about all that?
Yeah, no, I didn't know whether T.O. was going to get a job or not. He's got one in Seattle. It's funny, the tweet war's already begun. T.O. tweeted he's excited. Pete Carroll said he's excited too, and practice starts at 8 o'clock. So a subtle reminder to T.O. But yeah, I mean, it'll be an interesting dynamic, especially with Braylon Edwards. It's too bad maybe HBO is not following him this year. With the documentary, we should see interesting news out of Seattle. But serious side, Matt Flynn, and we'll talk about Seattle as we go through the divisions. But I mean, they'll have a new quarterback throwing the ball this year, so a good chance for maybe Tio to build up a quick rapport with a new quarterback. No one really has much of a head start on him there.
Yeah, it's anyone's ball game in that division. I know San Francisco had a great year, so like I said, it's going to be a great experiment, and we'll see what kind of influence T.O. has on a younger, maybe more impressionable quarterback. So, so that's I don't know. I think pretty exciting news in the fantasy world. T.O. could be relevant again. It's always a good thing.
And what about the Jaguars? They signed Justin Blackmon.
Yeah, I mean, he's a rookie. It was, obviously I couldn't have expected him to go too long into the preseason without signing. Again, Jacksonville is another team. They really need all the help they can get. So, there's legal troubles for him to get over as well. But Justin Blackmon is a great talent, and you always hope for some big things. There's usually a breakout receiver or two that's a rookie, and we'll find out if Justin's the one or not. With MJD still holding out, that they really need to work. He really needs to work on his rapport with Gabbert. So
hopefully he has a clause written into his contract that Blaine Gabbert, if he's not successful this year, cannot be the quarterback going forward for Jacksonville. Blackman's got all the talent in the world. I agree. I talked about it last week, and I think we'll continue to talk about it and see it. I have a lot of concerns about the overall, fantasy value out of Jacksonville with Gabbert at the helm.
And keeping going on the lines of quarterbacks, I guess Cleveland officially tabbed Brandon Weeden now.
Yeah, that was sort of a no-brainer after drafting him in the first round. I guess you have to make it official at some point. Colt McCoy, I'm interested to see whether he stays in Cleveland or he ends up being cut or traded at some point. But Brandon Weeden is definitely the starter in Cleveland. I think he's going to be given every opportunity to succeed. He's got some new tools to work with, and they may actually have a running game. So you have to hope things are looking up in Cleveland.
echo what John says. 27, 28-year-old rookie. He's not really a rookie. You can't let him sit behind someone for 2 or 3 years. He's going to be 31 by the time he starts. So you got to get him out there and see what he's got.
And with Miami, they are, their first-string quarterback is now listed as David Garrard. What are your thoughts on that, John?
Well, and I think he's been the de facto number one pretty much throughout. He's got some injury history, but he definitely brings some experience to the table. So I'm not sure how long it's going to last, but I think he's a serviceable quarterback. Now Miami's got they've got some big question marks. Seeing if Chad Johnson can fill Brandon Marshall's shoes. And I'm not really sure how well, how much it's really going to matter who the starting quarterback is. So, again, another interesting experiment. Seems to be quite a few of those going on in the NFL, and it's a tough division for them. So, hopefully they make the right decision.
Yeah, Miami, doesn't seem like they have a great plan to me. The whole Garrard move, I think, is interesting. I don't find much wrong with Matt Moore as far as a serviceable quarterback. They obviously drafted Tannehill, so is Garrard this great quarterback for Tannehill to study under for a year? Is he going to give a lot more than Moore? Not sure. Not sure what the master plan is right now in Miami at the quarterback position.
And honestly, the word out of camp is Tannehill's actually looking very good. So he could just, as would be expected when you draft a rookie quarterback early, that he could just be a placeholder. I think Garrard could be the type that he may end up being starter and then may end up being cut before the season's out. We've seen that happen before. And I think, Matt Moore has definitely filled in capably, and he's had some exciting moments. So he may be a good number two, whereas I don't think Garrard really is a number two quarterback.
Well, it's now transitioning into injuries. Who's going to be ready for, the first week of season and who's not? Sidney Rice might not be ready for the first week.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I had a little static on my line.
Sidney Rice might not be ready for the first week now. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, again, I think that's why, they I don't want to say they rushed, but Seattle signed two enigmatic receivers. I won't say problematic, even though that probably applies as well. And I don't think, I don't think that they are set at wide receiver. So they brought in some aging talent to compete, and so I don't think he's going to be ready. And I actually think it's going to be more than week one. Otherwise, they may have just waited the injury out. So I think he may be out for a little while. Sidney Rice definitely had some relevance, but again, I'm not really sure you're talking, number one, even high-end number two receivers out of Seattle.
Yeah, it's interesting. We hit on Seattle a little bit earlier. Lots of moving parts there, especially with, in all likelihood, Matt Flynn taking the ball to start the year. Actually, Russell Wilson also has looked good in camp, but I do think they've invested in Flynn. I expect he'll be the guy. Now's the time. Training camp means more for some than others, and new quarterback, new system for Flynn, or semi-new system for Flynn. He's got some familiarity with the system, but he's got to get comfortable with these receivers, and it's unfortunate about Rice, and it could very well open a door for one of these retreaded veterans, Owens or Edwards, to build that connection.
Yeah. But I think, I wouldn't even be surprised. We'll see what either of them has left in the tank. But, mid-year you could be looking at Golden Tate, Doug Baldwin starting receiving core. And, I'm not so sure that's so bad. Doug Baldwin had a pretty good year last year. I believe he was an undrafted rookie last year. And, Golden Tate has had all the promise of the world. I think he was a Notre Dame guy, and I think he came into the league with all the promise. Didn't quite fulfill it. But, again, we often see receivers take up to 3 years to really fulfill their destiny, as I'd say. So, Golden Tate could be in for a nice season coming into this year. Again, there's a lot up in the air. If Matt Flynn can produce like, a Green Bay offense would produce, and you'll see a lot of similarities in Seattle with Green Bay. It could be a nice, decent year numbers-wise from Matt Flynn, but, it may be stretched out against a couple of different receivers. So, while the quarterback may put up the points, receivers may be number 3, low end number 2 at best.
All right, guys. Well, when we come back, we're going to be talking to our guest, Stan Russo of Fantasy Football Evolution, which is the first ever worldwide fantasy football competition. And everyone needs to get involved in this. So when we get back from our break, we will be talking to him.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95, and we'll throw in a complimentary cruise for 2 to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com.
Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Now put your fantasy skills into the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Draft your team and then manage it through a 10-week regular season, a 1-week elimination round, and finally, if you're good enough, a 64-team tournament that will determine the first ever Fantasy Football Evolution champion. The winner of Fantasy Football Evolution receives $25,000, cash prizes paid to the top 16 players. Visit www.nextgenffe.com for more details. The only way to know if you're the best is to play against the best. Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at KickassFantasyFootball.com.
Welcome back, guys. This is Kick-Ass Fantasy Football. Your host, Jennifer Studer, and I'm here with Jumpin' John Prevost and Judge Ray Jaffe. And welcome our first guest, Stan Russo of Fantasy Football Evolution. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. So can you first tell us just where you came up with your fabulous idea of starting the first ever worldwide fantasy football competition?
It's a funny story, and I'll make it quick. About 4 years ago, I had competed really well in my league and had the most dominant team during the year. And another friend of mine from high school was in a fantasy football league out in California and had done the same. And we were comparing our teams against one another, and basically nobody would give in. So it kind of dawned on me, even though fantasy football leagues are fantastic and it's what we all love, there's something missing at the end of it. And I decided to focus my attention on building a competition for the entire world to see who was the best.
Well, it's definitely a fabulous idea, in my opinion, and I definitely think that the prizes are well worth it. Can you tell us a little bit about the prizes for the winner and then the consolation competition as well?
Sure. First place prize is going to win $25,000 in cash. We're going to give the top 16 finalists cash prizes, and everyone outside of the top 16 are going to be entered into what we call a consolation competition. And that consolation competition is going to be basically your scores from week 11 of the regular season to week 17 of the regular season, and the cumulative total is going to determine who wins that consolation competition, and the top prize in that is $1,000. So even if you don't make it into the big 64-team tournament or get bounced early, you still have a shot at winning the consolation competition and a decent prize.
Well, that sounds great to me. And you're also going to be with us at the Fantasy Football Fest. Isn't that correct?
Yes, it's coming on pretty close, about, 10, 11 days away, and we're getting pretty excited to introduce our product to a wide range of fans.
Definitely. I can't believe it's already upon us. We were talking about it back in the springtime, and time really, really flies. But we're definitely thrilled that you're going to be with us there, and I'm sure that all of the fans will love what Fantasy Football Evolution is going to bring to the table.
We really hope so. I mean, once we get somebody who understands what we do, they fall in love with it. And the big thing for us is just explaining to people that we're not a regular league. We're actually not a league at all. And you don't need 11 other people to play because you're technically playing against everyone else who signed up. You can come on yourself, sign up, and everything will be just like you're playing against everybody else in the world. So it's much different than a league, and it's a one-of-a-kind competition. There's nothing like this around.
Now for the Fantasy Football Fest, are you going to be there both days? Can people come meet with you and talk to you about the Fantasy Football Evolution both days?
Absolutely. Well, we have a booth by the autograph stand. I think it's booth 731, in case that helps. And my team and myself will be there on Saturday and on Sunday. We'll be doing some presentations. We'll be fielding questions, going over everything about Fantasy Football Evolution. We'll be signing people up if they're interested, giving out cards, giving out some gifts, and basically just trying to bring more awareness to this one-of-a-kind competition.
Well, that sounds great. We are definitely looking forward to seeing you there. I'm looking forward to meeting you officially in person. And thank you so much for being with us on the show today, everyone. That's Stan Russo of Fantasy Football Evolution. And you can visit their site at nextgenffe.com for more details.
Thank you very much for having me.
Have a great night, Stan.
You too, Jen.
All right, guys, so I'm definitely looking forward to this Fantasy Football Evolution. I think it's just, a great idea. He definitely encompasses everything that people would want that they can't get within their actual league themselves. Don't you think?
I think it's great. No, I think it's a great idea, actually, because there's definitely a lot of talk between friends in different leagues about, who had the better team or dominant season. So I'm excited to see how this works out, and I'm excited to have an opportunity to get in, and we'll see how well it goes. I think it's a great idea, and I'm glad to see someone's finally taking the bull by the horn.
Definitely.
Yeah, the listeners should suck it up and make the drive out to Atlantic City and have a fun time and enjoy themselves and soak in the fantasy football knowledge. So great chance to learn about a new product.
I second that, and there's nothing better than pure good competition. So you can never go wrong there. We're going to take another short break, and then we're going to be back we're going to discuss the NFC divisions. Last week we did the AFC, and we're just going to go through the East, the North, the West, and the South, and we're just going to talk about how different players on the different teams are going to affect their fantasy league points for you guys. So we'll be right back after this break.
Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Well, now put your fantasy skills and savvy to the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Fantasy Football Evolution is the first ever worldwide fantasy football competition. The winner gets $25,000. Go to nextgenffe.com to sign up today. The only way to know if you're the best is to play against the best. Fantasy Football Evolution at nextgenffe.com.
This fantasy football season, be sure to check out Power Play Fantasy Sports, featuring free and pay-to-play fantasy football games with huge cash prizes. Power Play Fantasy Sports is your home for the 2012 fantasy football season. Visit the website PowerPlayFantasySports.com and use the promo code KICK to receive 20% off your entry in the Power Player Fantasy Football League, featuring a $5,000 grand prize. Again, that's promo code KICK. If you know football, this is the game for you. Visit PowerPlayFantasySports.com today.
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at kickassfantasyfootball.com.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It's Jennifer Studer and our fantasy football experts, Judge Ray Jaffe and Jumpin' John Prevost. And we're going to start our night off with the East Division for the NFC and talk about the Dallas Cowboys and how their selection now with Kyle Orton on the roster, how that's going to affect him as a fantasy player and then some of the other guys on their roster.
Well, obviously Kyle Orton is going to be the backup in Dallas. I think it's actually a great pickup for them, giving fans or giving owners a little bit of a sense of relief, pick them up to handcuff in case anything happens to Tony Romo. I think Tony, often throughout the years he's missed a couple games a year, whether a shoulder injury or what have you. So having a very capable backup in Kyle Orton, I think, is a very good thing. So, it's a positive for Dallas. I'm not sure they really did a whole lot else from a fantasy perspective. They definitely shored up some holes on defense, and that was their focus in the draft in the offseason. So from an offensive standpoint, you're going to see a little bit more of the same, but again, just a little bit of security and a very strong backup to Kyle Orton.
Yep, pretty much. I agree, John. Pretty much status quo for the Cowboys. If Romo does go down to injury, Orton's certainly someone to look at. He's got good weapons around him. To see if DeMarco Murray, how he handles the full-time role, but other comings and goings, pretty much the same group has been there the last couple of years, and they'll roll them out again and see what kind of production they get from a fantasy perspective.
All right, guys, and moving on to the Giants, obviously Super Bowl champions, but they've let go of some guys and some new guys have come in. Do you think that will, first of all, affect the overall team dynamic, kind of stepping aside from fantasy football? And then in terms of fantasy players, who do you think is really going to step it up and make a huge impact this year?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Yeah, that's how we go with Dallas and the Giants. And gosh, it's just hard to talk about all this. It's actually going to be interesting because anytime you change a dynamic from a championship team, you just don't know what's going to happen. And there's certain players who could be team leaders or who could play vital roles that are now gone. And so you take Mary Manningham. So he left. He's now with San Francisco. So we'll talk about his impact on the 49ers. You're talking about a very steady, short-handed receiver, who's done some great things for the Giants, and now he's gone. And with Hakeem Nicks, he's still on the mend. It might be an interesting change for the wide receiving corps. And same thing for the running backs. Brandon Jacobs is gone. He's years away from being the stud back. He had a couple of really good years. But those are over, and Ahmad Bradshaw has taken the reins. But then they also drafted a running back in David Wilson, out of Virginia Tech, and I think the difference is both David Wilson and Ahmad Bradshaw have a more similar game, whereas Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw is more of a thunder and lightning deal. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, and whether David Wilson actually steals some carries that Ahmad Bradshaw would have. What kind of impact losing Manningham will have. Can Victor Cruz be the guy and the number one receiver? And he may not quite have the help that he needs in order to be that number one. So I think it's going to be an interesting year for the Giants.
Yeah, the Giants definitely, they focused offense heavy with the first 2 rounds picking offensive players. It's interesting because David Wilson and Ruben Randall, the wide receiver, both will start the year in backup roles, but, they're behind players that either, have missed time to injury in the recent past, Ahmad Bradshaw and Hakeem Nicks, or in Bradshaw's case, sort of have been used in at least as a part of a two-headed monster. He got the majority of the carries. So I actually think they're 2 players to keep an eye on, Wilson and Randall. Randall in particular. The Giants have turned more and more into a passing team. It pains me to do this as an Eagles fan, but I was sort of one of the champions of the Eli Manning fan club last year. I know. It pains me. It hurts to say it, but I was high on Manning all year long, and I think he's the kind of guy that's going to use his weapons. So Ruben Randall's a name to watch.
Yes, I actually think that David Wilson might have a little bit more to offer. Eli Manning had a great end of the year, but I still think if you're going to ask too much of Eli, I think that he may not be able to produce. I'm still not quite sold on the Eli bandwagon, and so we'll see how that plays out. And if they try and change too much and rely on Eli too much, I'm curious to see how that goes. So.
Never, John, never let the numbers get in the way of a good story. I think Manning was a top 8 quarterback in every statistical category last year. And we'll run through the numbers when we hit the Giants in more detail. But Eli is, it's hard. It's hard. It was hard for me to come to grips. I know you're with me as a true Green Eagles fan, but I think we got to come to grips with it. Eli's the real deal.
And maybe I'll acquiesce later in the season, but and maybe it's just letting those personal feelings get in the way. But it'll be a fun experiment to watch, I guess, and how our judgments play out.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
I love that clip. And I'm glad it's after what John said.
I would agree with that, except for the fact that he hasn't heard everything I've ever said, so I'm sure there's quite a few things that would make his head spin. But we'll
you guys, now we can get personal and we can talk about your Eagles, so go for it.
Who?
Now we can get personal and we can talk about your Eagles.
Yeah,
they're next on my list.
Yes, no, I was joking. Yeah, obviously big fans, Eagle fans on the show here. So I think I don't know that they made a whole lot of impact drafting from a fantasy perspective. They got Nick Foles, who I believe will be their third quarterback, if not their second quarterback as the year progresses, which obviously has some relevance due to Michael Vick's injury history. I'm not sure they're going to have him ready to fill in the shoes early on, but he's looked solid in camp, and he definitely has a lot of potential. And they drafted Marty Gilliard as well, and I think they brought in Marty Gilliard as well, and I think that he will be actually a fairly interesting pick just due to all the injuries that they've had. So, not a huge offensive fantasy change. They did a lot more on defense, and that's where I'm waiting for the impact. Just from, whether it's sack total rising from Vin Curry or, just being a more stalwart defense and relying more on the run, actually, as they're running out the clock. I think maybe the defensive changes they've had might actually have a little bit more of an impact.
Yeah, I agree. I think, if anything on the Eagles, the defensive side of the ball might get a little bit more play, a little bit higher slot as a fantasy defense. Similar to the way we talked about Dallas. It's really the same group. It's Vic, McCoy, it's Deshaun and Macklin and Selleck, and that's who they're going to roll with. And all of them in their own right are good, very good fantasy contributors, and we'll see how it plays out. We will certainly hit on the Eagles plenty as the year goes on.
Now, I just have a quick personal question for both of you guys. Do you both have LeSean McCoy on your rosters for your fantasy teams, or?
But again, it so much depends on whether if you're in a snake draft where you're able to pick, or what your strategy is for an auction draft. I mean, if you're asking, would we love Sean McCoy? I mean, unequivocally, yes. I mean, he's going to be a superstar. I do worry a little bit about whether they're going to try and lessen his workload or not. I mean, they have a couple happy receivers in camp now. With Sean Jackson signing his contract, Jeremy Macklin, who's due for some big numbers. So there's a lot of talent that they need to spread the ball around to. But I mean, you just look at LeSean McCoy in the years he's had. There's absolutely in every way would I want him on my team. I'm not sure if he's my number one running back. I've been touting Ray Rice a lot, and I know Arian Foster is number one on a lot of boards, but he's right up there. So absolutely.
I think Arian Foster's going to be my number one, but I think McCoy's definitely in the discussion for number two. It's interesting. Last year you got a bargain with McCoy. This year there's no more bargain, and something that we'll hit on in some of the shows leading up to the season, and as drafts start to happen more and more as we get into mid-late August. If you're from, in this case, the Philadelphia area, and McCoy's out there, you have to be wary because there's usually a few extra dollars if it's an auction-type draft price tag onto the local guys. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We hit on it last year, but there is it's a phenomenon to watch out for if you're playing straight to win, straight for victory. Watch to get suckered into the rooting interest of their hometown guys, where they're going a couple slots higher in a snake draft. You're paying a few extra dollars for them in an auction draft.
That's definitely a great point. And to wrap up our Eastern Division, the Washington Redskins, obviously, RG3's there now. What do you guys think about people, trying to draft him?
Well, I think most people or many people are going to expect to hit lightning in the bottle, similar to Cam Newton from last year. And I caution those who are expecting the same thing, because that was sort of a once in a lifetime, I think, happening. He had the best rookie season from a quarterback ever. So is that going to happen 2 years in a row? I highly doubt it. On the flip side, he's definitely a talent. They brought in a lot of new receivers for him to throw to, so there's a lot of change that's happening in Washington. So it's definitely he's definitely going to have the opportunities, and they don't have that super solid running game. They've had a couple of different people in the mix, and I've actually heard Evan Royster's been looking good in camp. I'm not sure Tim Hightower's going to be ready to start. Roy Helu, so there's other options in running back, but I think Griffin's going to be looking to pass the ball. I think he's got a good head on his shoulders, so I think he's going to make some smart decisions. And he could be a good, solid quarterback play, but I don't expect him to reach Cam Newton numbers.
Yeah, I agree with you to an extent. I don't think he's going to have Newton numbers. And I don't know that we're going to see many quarterbacks with Newton numbers, but I do think, for a rookie quarterback, he's got that kind of skill set that's interesting because he can get points with his feet. And while I expect Andrew Luck will turn out to be the better long-term quarterback, I think from a fantasy perspective, certainly this year, maybe next year, maybe always, RG3 might be the guy. He's going to get either the rushing touchdowns and the points with the feet. Pierre Garçon, the new addition, coming over from the Colts, and obviously brought in to help make the transition for RG3 easy, give him a big target to throw to. So we talked last week a lot about watching, what are the connections to watching training camp. RG3 to Garçon certainly one. See if they start to build up that connection, and Garçon could be an interesting pick for you.
Yeah, I like Garçon as well. I mean, he's definitely a receiver to watch, and he may be the top receiver to get from Washington. I think the fact that they brought in so many receivers doesn't bode well for Santana Moss. Santana Moss has always been one of those, teases of a receiver. He's had some really good games, but he's never really been that solid receiver you can count on. But Garcon, I think, can win you some football games. Whether he's a solid number one throughout the year, I'm not so sure. He's always seems to have his ups and downs as well, but he's definitely had some great games and not some great quarterbacks that have been throwing the ball to him. So with someone like Griffin thrown to him, I think he's going to be a solid pick.
All right. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ray.
I was just going to say, I just wanted to echo for the listeners. I've heard the same thing you have, John, about Evan Royster. I think they have this three-headed monster running back. I think he's going to be a guy to keep your eye on and watch. I expect he might emerge as the lead back in Washington this year.
Well, that's what I would like to hear. And when we come back, we are going to continue on with the NFC North and talk about the Bears, the Lions, the Packers, and the Vikings. But make sure that you check out our site, kickassfantasyfootball.com. We actually have an early bird special. For $9.95, you can get the whole entire season. You can get, all of the different projections, and you can listen to our blog talk show, and then you can get all of the different components and all the different customized cheat sheets. So it's for a whole season for $9.95, which is actually 50% savings. So be sure to check out kickassfantasyfootball.com. And with that, we will be right back after the break.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and kickassfantasyfootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from fantasyjudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for two to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with kickassfantasyfootball.com.
Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Well, now put your fantasy skills and savvy to the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Fantasy Football Evolution is the first ever worldwide fantasy football competition. The winner gets $25,000. Go to nextgenffe.com to sign up today. The only way to know if you're the best is to play against the best. Fantasy Football Evolution at nextgenffe.com.
Don't let your fantasy issues become a reality. Fantasy Judgment is the premier dispute resolution service for all fantasy sports leagues. Led by attorney Michael Stein, the Supreme Court of Fantasy Judgment will resolve any and all issues or conflicts that arise in fantasy leagues. This includes disputed trades, collusion, abuse of power by league commissioners, lineup and roster errors, draft issues, score discrepancies, and interpretation of league rules. We alleviate the burden for league commissioners and allow everyone to focus on winning their leagues rather than arguing over disputes. Visit www.fantasyjudgment.com.
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the professor,
and me, the commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at kickassfantasyfootball.com.
Welcome back to your Tuesday night show with Jennifer Studer and Judge Ray Jaffe and Jumpin' John Prevost. We're now going to move on to the North Division of the NFC Conference, and let's talk about how things are changing up for Chicago, as Brandon Marshall is now in the picture. What are you guys thinking?
Well, I think it's a great pickup for Chicago, or it could be a great pickup for Chicago. Brandon Marshall definitely has a lot of talent. He's got he's got a checkered past that they're going to have to overcome. But he played with he played with Jay Cutler in Denver, and the trade may come back to life.
Circus music in the background there? What is that?
I think it's starting to be Jaws, but I'm not really sure. So, Brandon Marshall, he could be the best pickup that the Bears could have made, but he could be a little bit of trouble for him too. So we'll see how it goes. I think the Bears are certainly expecting a lot from him, but I actually like the pickup of Michael Bush as well. I mean, he was he was a stalwart fill-in for Oakland last year, and given the opportunity, he can really run the ball between the tackles. So not only is he there in case of another injury for Matt Forte, but he also could be a change of pace for him because Forte likes to come out of the backfield and catch some balls. So definitely got a nice 1-2 punch there. So could be an interesting year for Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely like Marshall. Off-field or on-field problems aside, the guy can play. Cutler, he seems to continue to show, frankly, a little more, even though he's maybe not the most likable guy in the world, he's certainly showing more and more flashes every year of becoming a quarterback that can really potentially lead be your QB1 in a shorter team fantasy league. So I'd like to see him and Marshall build up that connection this offseason and see how it plays out. And Brandon Marshall, for all his problems, is a fantasy point machine, no question.
All right, guys. Well, moving on to Detroit. They now have Ryan Broyles. They picked him up in the draft. Do you think that he's going to perform, up to par, or what are your expectations for him as he goes through his first preseason?
Yeah, it's interesting. Detroit has, I would say, 2 solid receivers already. So, I'm not sure. Maybe they weren't sure what was going to happen with Titus Young due to some off-season issues. I think Titus Young's a great talent, and obviously they have Calvin Johnson. So they're bringing in that third receiver. I'm not really sure how much of an impact he's going to have. With Detroit, it's another example of more of the same. You got Matt Stafford thrown to Calvin Johnson, and that's just a pretty good pickup right there. I mean, a pretty good opportunity right there with those two. So I'm not really sure how much impact he's going to have. Maybe they could run in more, 4 or 5 wide receiver sets, so that with the running back issues they have. So maybe that's what they have him in for. So there could be some relevance if they go with the extra receiver sets.
Yeah, and again, not too many changes for the Lions. They did bring in Broyles. I actually think he'll certainly see time. I love Titus Young this year as a sleeper to really emerge, have a big year. Everyone in the world's got a target on Calvin Johnson to double, triple team. Titus Young does have, as John said, a lot of raw talent. I think he's going to start to mold that talent to a very, very productive NFL and fantasy receiver. So not a new addition, but I think a new breakout player as we get into the season. It's going to be Titus Young.
Yeah, no, I like that. Right, I like that train of thought because frankly, I think they're going to have to. I mean, you look at their running back depth chart, and they got Javid Best, who's got concussion issues. They got Michael Lishore, who has coming off a season-long injury. Plus, he's had some drug history.
Oh my God!
And they got Kevin Smith, who has had some good solid games for him, but he's definitely not an every week, every down back. So I think they're going to have to pass, and they need some people to step up, and Titus Young is first in line.
So that was terrifying. That "oh my God" clip sounded like you, Jen. Is everything okay?
Yes. I thought my connection. I just lost my connection, but we're okay. So I'm happy. Yes.
There we go. We like to hear the applause or the "oh my God" and the boos.
Yes, no boos. But what about Green Bay? Because do they really have any guys coming in?
Maybe the question is, do they need any guys coming in? I mean, that's I think they were such a solid offense last year, and obviously explosive. They're still a pretty young team. except for Donald Driver. I mean, they still got some pretty young receivers. They got a young quarterback. The only question they obviously really have is at running back. But they drafted their first. Take a look here. First 5, 6, 7, first 6 draft picks were all on defense. So they wanted to shore up one of their weak spots, and they filled a lot of holes on defense, and they're just going to let things loose again on offense. So I'm not sure they needed much change.
Guys, nothing to add to that. I mean, it's the same group of guys going out. When we talk more about in-depth breakout of the teams, we can talk about who we think on Green Bay might be the breakout players, but it's going to be the same cast. The only thing I'll give as a little teaser is second half of last year, Greg Jennings, who had been sort of the main guy, started to take a little bit of a step back. Jordy Nelson started to emerge more. So there could be a little bit of a difference in the pecking order, but no new names to the equation for Green Bay.
Well, that's all definitely true. I mean, they really don't need any new additions. But what about the Vikings? What are you guys taking with them? Are there any guys that you would like to draft out of the Vikings this year?
The Vikings are the opposite of Green Bay. They need a lot of help. That's just trouble in a bottle. And I'm not really. I know Ziggy Wilf came out and said that he expects them to win the division, and I guess he has to say that. But their star running back's injured. Their number one receiver wasn't a full-time receiver last year, and plus he had migraine issues. Their quarterback is still a work in progress. They need help. So I'm not really sure what you do with Minnesota. I don't know that they, I'm not sure. I'm kind of at a loss for words because a lot of it depends on Adrian Peterson and how well he comes back and when he comes back. He says he's going to be back week 1, and I'm not so sure that everyone believes it. So, I'm not really sure what to make of him.
Yeah, it's funny, John. I'm with you on Minnesota. You have Pond, who I think has some talent, but still very young, very raw. Peterson is a guy that I hate to say, but I feel like he's one of these guys that one of these years, and I'm not sure if this is the year, he's going to take that unfortunate step off the cliff that the great running backs take. And there's a long list of them that all of a sudden they just don't have it anymore. And he's been beat up so much. I was even a little concerned last year. He was fine. I'm more concerned this year. Percy Harvin's a talented guy. I'm not sure how it all fits together. So Minnesota is interesting, and I am a little wary of Peterson.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
You're going to have to rely on Toby Gerhart, and I think he's a good, solid performer, but he's no Adrian Peterson. The only thing that they did do is they brought in Matt Teal as an offensive tackle. They drafted him with the 4th pick in the first round, so that always helps. Hopefully he's a road grader and can really open some holes there, but. That team's going to live and die, I think, depending on when Adrian Peterson comes back and how healthy he is. And I agree, Ray. He's just taken such a pounding over these years that you got to figure one day it's going to catch up to him.
Well, everyone definitely needs to take your advice because you guys offer some great advice, that's for sure. But we're going to take a quick break. We have no time left already, so we may not get to talk about Division South and West in the NFC conferences, but do not fear because we will be back with you again next Tuesday, and then we also have our 2 other Blog Talk radio shows Wednesday and Thursday this week, and then on ESPN Radio 97.3, that'll be on Sunday, so don't even worry, we're going to get you guys covered even if we don't finish the Western Division today. So with that, we will be right back after the break.
Fantasy football owners, it's draft time, and KickassFantasyFootball.com makes it easy.
How do we make it easy?
Projections from the experts, cheat sheets with your scoring rules.
What else?
Articles all season long, waiver wire picks, trade advice, everything you need to win a championship.
How about a free judgment from FantasyJudgment.com, a $15 value?
Now we're talking.
Subscribe today for just $9.95. We'll throw in a complimentary cruise for two to the Bahamas.
Cruise to a championship with KickassFantasyFootball.com.
Are you good at fantasy football? Are you used to winning your fantasy league? Now put your fantasy skills into the ultimate test by playing against the rest of the world with Fantasy Football Evolution. Draft your team and then manage it through a 10-week regular season, a 1-week elimination round, and finally, if you're good enough, a 64-team tournament that will determine the first ever Fantasy Football Evolution champion. The winner of Fantasy Football Evolution receives $25,000, cash prizes paid to the top 16 players. Visit www.nextgenffe.com for more details. The only way to know if you're the best is to play against the best.
Fantasy football owners, the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show is back every Sunday this season with everything you need to cruise into a championship. Join me, the Professor,
and me, the Commish, along with fantasy insider Matt Lowry. Get all your fantasy football news as we break down all the players and tell you who to start and who to trade while we take your calls all show long.
We'll see you every Sunday morning at 9 a.m. all season long here on 97.3 ESPN. Check us out on the web at KickassFantasyFootball.com.
This fantasy football season, be sure to check out Power Play Fantasy Sports, featuring free and pay-to-play fantasy football games with huge cash prizes. Power Play Fantasy Sports is your home for the 2012 fantasy football season. Visit the website PowerPlayFantasySports.com and use the promo code KICK to receive 20% off your entry in the Power Player Fantasy Football League, featuring a $5,000 grand prize. Again, that's promo code KICK. If you know football, this is the game for you. Visit PowerPlayFantasySports.com today.
All right, welcome back, guys. This is the last 9 minutes of our second Tuesday night show.
Nice.
I'm your host, Jennifer Streeter, here with Jumpin' John Prevost and Judge Ray Jaffe, and we're just going to wrap up this evening talking about the Southern Division of the NFC. So let's top it off with the Atlanta Falcons, guys.
The Atlanta Falcons. Well, I'll start off. I'm not sure that they did a whole lot to bringing in new faces. I think their biggest thing is not new faces, but new roles. And as Ray would attest, I've been actually a Matt Ryan fan for years, drafting him, trading for him, waiting for him to do something, and he hasn't been horrible, but I think maybe
man crush,
definitely. And I admit to it, and there's definitely a few of those that I have had over the years. Again, I think it's the changing roles that I think, Michael Turner might be taking a few less carries, and Jacquizz Rodgers, going to take more of a workload. But I think, the biggest thing is, Julio Jones coming in his second year. Had a very good year last year, but I think, coming in, having a year of experience, a year in the off season, I think they're really going to have a nice passing game. So that's what I'm looking for.
Yep, pretty much status quo for them as well. Not a lot of comings or goings. But I do echo John's point. I think the Michael Turner and Roddy White, who have sort of held down the fort, will probably start to give a little bit to their the wide receiver 2, who might be a wide receiver 1 now, Julio Jones, and Jacquizz Rodgers. So, but no new names, just maybe some changing roles.
All right, guys, and moving on to the Carolina Panthers, they have some changes. What are they?
Well, I think the biggest thing for them actually is bringing in Michael Tolbert at the running back position. They definitely have a wealth of talent.
Man crush.
Come on now, let's be fair. I'm not saying he's going to be a stud. There you go. I'm not saying he's going to be a stud, but I think you're giving another outlet. He's actually a very good receiver out of the backfield another good outlet for Cam Newton. So Cam Newton won't have to rush for as many touchdowns. He can throw the short touchdown that may have been lacking. Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams there's definitely two really good running backs. We'll see if they're both there throughout the season. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Stewart gets traded. But having Mike Tolbert come out of the backfield, I think, is just a plus for Cam Newton. So if you're asking me what the biggest fantasy impact on their changes is, that would be where I'd go.
And I will not say that after every team you review, but it just so happens that it made sense for those two players. I know you have like Tolbert from his San Diego days.
I have.
Yeah, I agree. Tolbert's a big addition. Other than that, status quo. Again, we talked about guys that might be coming on the scene as additions. Brandon LaFell as the two wide receiver. But he's not new to the team. Tolbert is the new guy. It seems like they have one running back too many between Stewart, Williams, and Tolbert. So, as John said, you don't see many trades in the NFL, but it certainly seems like they'd be a good candidate to move one of those guys for help somewhere else.
That's fair enough. And now the Saints. They had their first preseason game. There's a lot on the line this year with them. They have a lot to live up to. But all I can really think of is Luke McCown. Is that how you pronounce his name? And he's new on their roster, right?
Yeah. Again, you're talking about someone who not I'm not even so sure about how adequate of a backup he is. He definitely fills a roster spot. Again, I think the Saints are going to live and die with Drew Brees. So if Drew Brees goes down, I think you're in trouble. So, I think for comings and goings, the biggest impact is going to be on the coaching staff and who's out and for how long and when they can come back and their interim head coach. There's definitely been a lot of turmoil. So I think the way they came out for their Hall of Fame game, Drew Brees looked good to play the series through a touchdown. I guess you can't expect more for that in the off season. So my guess would have been New Orleans takes a big step back just from all the turmoil. But the way they're going right now, maybe there is no step back. So that's going to be definitely a team to watch.
And just keep your eye on a new addition, Nick Toon, a rookie. They certainly have strong receivers in front of them, but the way New Orleans has shown year over year, they spread the ball around. So I do think he'll get his opportunities, and we'll see. Meacham is gone, so they have Colston, they have Moore, they have Devery Henderson, and maybe there is going to be some real playing time for Nick Toon. We'll see.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. Nick Toon has looked good in camp. I think Peter King was real excited about him when he was down there and saw him. He's a son of a former NFL wide receiver, Al Toon, so he's got some pedigree to him, and there's definitely been fantasy relevance for any and all Saints wide receivers. So I think maybe you just plug him to the mix, and especially with the inconsistency that some of them have had. Marquise Colston, I think, is very solid. Lance Moore's been a pretty decent receiver, but you've had someone like Meacham and Devery Henderson who've been up and down each game. So take out Meacham, throw in Nick Toon, plug him in for a couple games, and see what he can do.
Are you ready for the football?
All right, guys. Well, you know what? We're going to actually save Tampa Bay for next week because I want to talk to the commish. He's going to be on at a special time tomorrow at 10 p.m. with Fantasy Football Insider Matt Lowry, and it's a special time tomorrow. Definitely want to check it out. We have some new hosts coming in. And so, Commish, are you ready for tomorrow?
I am ready, Jen. Thanks for having me on. Jumpin' John, Judge Ray, great to hear your voices. Great show. I've been listening all night, and we're going to be on a special time tomorrow night. Me and Fantasy Insider Matt Lowry at 10 p.m. with one of our new hosts, Miss Brittany Walsh. So we're looking forward to welcoming her to the Blog Talk Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show on Thursday night. And we're going to talk a lot about getting everyone ready for the draft and a lot of these big preseason games coming up. I know there's a lot of good play on this Thursday night, so we're going to get into a lot of that. So make sure everyone tunes in tomorrow night, 10 p.m., right here on blogtalkradio.com for the Kick-Ass Fantasy Football Show.
Yes, and then again, we have another show on Thursday at 9 o'clock.
Actually,
Houston
so 7 o'clock on Thursday. It'll be on.
Yes, so everyone definitely needs to tune into that.
Yeah, we're going to get ready for those preseason games on Thursday night as well.
Yes, and then as always, guys, keep your questions coming in. Don't be shy. Call in. Ask our experts questions. They know what they're talking about. They're here to help you. And if you know you're a little camera shy per se and you don't want to be on the radio, then definitely feel free to join our chat room and definitely check us out at kickassfantasyfootball.com. Articles are being posted daily as you guys go into your drafts. We want to have you fully prepared. And then also check out Fantasy Football Evolution. And if you guys, you have, there's competition in your league, but you've got some friends all the way out there across the country and you want to see really who's the best of the best, that's definitely something to check out. So go to our site, kickassfantasyfootball.com, and you can hook yourself up there. So another week has gone by, guys, already.
Another week closer to get into the real thing. We got to start next week. We'll finish up these divisions. We'll start getting people ramped up for their drafts, and we'll start hitting it hard and heavy in mid to late August.
That's right. We got the
Fantasy
Football Fest coming up too, a couple of weeks. So we're really looking forward to that. To seeing all you guys will be together, and we'll have our own booth, and we'll get some great interviews in there. We'll be selling some subscriptions to our website. A lot of great giveaways. We'll be there with ESPN Radio. We'll have a 2-hour special on the 19th at the Fantasy Football Fest. Make sure you don't miss it. Come out and see us. And listen on Sunday at ESPN Radio 97.3. We're going to be giving away some more Fantasy Football Fest tickets. And check us out on Facebook and Twitter. We're giving away a pair of tickets on each of our listeners on Twitter and Facebook. So make sure you check that out.
Yes, sounds great, guys. And thank you, Kamish, for joining us for these last few minutes. Remember to check him out tomorrow night at 10 o'clock. And Judge Ray Jaffe and Jumpin' John Prevost, thank you again for being with me tonight. I'm Jennifer Studer, and we will talk to you next Tuesday.
Turn out the lights, the party's over.